He spoke tirelessly.
When you look at the praise of MacLean in the Russian revolutionary press from the First World War onwards, this is precisely the praise that is heaped upon him as a teacher. So that one person who was well versed in Marxism would teach a small group of people, and then those 6 people would then establish their own workers' circles and teach another 6 people, and in this way the movement would spread.
The name MacLean became part of Petrograd's revolutionary geography. There was now Prospect Maclana, MacLean Street. A further link was forged between the two great cities. Next to the suspension bridge, Lenin's Bolsheviks established their Glasgow branch office on South Portland Street. MacLean was named Russian consul. The government and even the post office refused to acknowledge its existence. Its mail went undelivered. MacLean passed news of his appointment to the then Secretary of State for Scotland, Robert Monroe, who in turn wrote to Prime Minister Lloyd George, unable to disguise his contempt.
MacLean's present activities on the Clyde, and in the Labour world generally, are most mischievous. I should deplore the adoption of any course which would strengthen this man's hand in the lowest strata of the Labour world.
In April 1918, MacLean was arrested again on charges of sedition. There was no diplomatic immunity for Russia's man in Glasgow. The moment was captured by a hidden camera smuggled into the court. Defending himself, his speech that day would become his most celebrated rallying cry.
No government is going to take from me my right to speak, my right to protest against wrong, my right to do everything that is for the benefit of mankind. I am not here then as the accused. I am here as the accuser of capitalism, dripping with blood from head to foot.
His eloquence counted for little as he began a 5-year sentence. As he left the court, he turned to his friends in the gallery and shouted,
"Keep it going, boys!"
He refused prison food. The authorities began to forcibly feed him through a stomach tube. In October 1918, having visited her husband, Agnes MacLean wrote to the prison authorities.
It is no use trying to blind me to the fact that his health is rapidly being broken.
Demonstrations continued for his release, and a reluctant Labour Party named the equally reluctant prisoner candidate for the Gorbals constituency, in preference to the sitting MP. At the war's end, MacLean was granted a royal pardon and returned to jubilant scenes in Glasgow.
For the Gorbals this is the day, and Glasgow belongs to him. Great John MacLean's coming home to the Clyde.
His release made the front page of Pravda, the Russian state newspaper predicting a British uprising. That revolution was the very essence of MacLean. Parliamentary democracy assumed a poor second place. As rumours spread of his failing mental health, he spoke only once in his campaign for the Gorbals seat and lost the election. He also lost his wife. Suspicious to the point of paranoia, he accused Agnes of poisoning his food, of becoming a government agent. Unable to cope, she walked out of their Pollockshaw's home, taking their children to live with relatives.
I think it would be incorrect to say that somehow he was clinically mad. There were those who said he did lose a degree of judgment. He became extremely suspicious of other people.
Lloyd George had failed to come good on his wartime promise to build a land fit for heroes. Returning troops swelled the ranks of the disaffected, unemployed, hungry, frustrated, and deceived. To reduce unemployment, Glasgow's workers called a strike, demanding a maximum 40-hour week. Manny Shinwell gave the government until the last day of January to respond to their claim. He threatened unconstitutional tactics if the workers were ignored. His friend, the revolutionary school teacher, argued against a revolutionary rising. There was, insisted John MacLean, no national strike. The miners, seen as the cornerstone of any possible revolution, were still at work. Doggedly, MacLean continued with speaking engagements in England. Glasgow's remaining militants ignored the man they increasingly called mad. This strike promised more than any labour dispute. This promised a January revolution. The 31st of January was Shinwell's deadline. It would become known as Bloody Friday. English regiments were sent to Glasgow to defend the city from its people. Scottish troops were locked down in Maryhill barracks, the authorities terrified that their firepower might lend its weight to the striking workers. That day, the Clydeside strikers thronged George Square and Shinwell leads a deputation into the city chambers.
Well, it wasn't very long after the Russian Revolution, and there was a kind of revolutionary atmosphere. They thought if you could depose the Tsar and destroy the Tsarist regime, then we could deal with capitalism in the United Kingdom.
Scuffles break out. Tramcars are stopped, bottles are thrown. The city's sheriff and Lord Provost appear on the steps of the chambers and, literally, read the Riot Act.
Our sovereign lord the king chargeth and commandeth all persons being assembled immediately to disperse themselves and peaceably to depart to their habitations.
The police charged from the southwest corner.
Upon the pains contained in the act made in the first year.
Writing years later, Gallagher remembered those moments.
Men were sprawling all around, and just beneath where I was standing, a woman was lying on her side, and on her face were the marks of a muddy boot.
Gallagher was singled out by the Glasgow police, first battened, then arrested. Inside the chambers, Shinwell and Kirkwood were told that the 40-hour week was an impossibility. From a window above the square, they saw that the workers were being battered to defeat by the police. Above the sounds of riot they called retreat. The strikers fled to the relative sanctuary of Glasgow Green. The army guns had gone unfired. Glasgow's revolution was postponed. The next morning, 6 tanks sat at the salt market, a warning against any further upheaval. Willie Gallagher, speaking 30 years later, still regretted the missed opportunity.
We should have been staging a workers' revolution, but we hadn't sufficient political understanding.
Is it true that you were contemplating a move on Maryhill Barracks?
If the troops in Maryhill Barracks had come out, there would have been big doings in Glasgow.
There had been no armed support, no citizen army. There would be no Petrograd on the Clyde.
The major capitals of Britain were never in danger of becoming out of control of the state in the way that Petrograd quite clearly did for Nicholas II.
Glasgow's socialists were drifting away from revolution, towards the Labour Party and the ballot box. MacLean's new Scottish Workers' Republican Party was increasingly marginalised. He predicted a great war between Britain and the USA. He refused to join the British Communist Party and backed Scottish independence.
I don't think that John MacLean was a Scottish nationalist. What John MacLean was a Marxist. And what most interested MacLean was how to progress the revolution. So that in terms of a political strategy, he quite clearly thought that Scotland, as a separate country, was far firmer and riper for revolution than the rest of the United Kingdom.
In the midst of a scheduled campaigning speech in a Glasgow cinema, MacLean's oratory was finally halted. On the 25th of November 1923, his pneumonia bettered him and he left the stage for the last time. The week before, he had asked his estranged wife Agnes to return to their Pollockshaw's home. The little money he had paid for the house to be redecorated in the attempt to woo her back. He had chosen his cause over his wife. The 4 years' separation had fallen hardest on her. Agnes would care for him in his last fortnight of life. He died at his Pollockshaw's home on the 30th of November 1923, St Andrew's Day. He was only 44. His mind and body shattered by 5 spells of imprisonment. "10,000 people followed MacLean's casket on its route from Glasgow's south side to Eastwood Cemetery. He had given his life to the socialist cause and seen scarce few genuine victories in return.
So when they shut the shipyards or come to steal the oil, and all the Scottish people are coming to the boil, we'll mind the John MacLean and the movement that he led. We'll have to grasp the thistle, and the thistle must be red. Oh, here's to John. He's a star that shines in Scottish history. I mean, he made mistakes. Even Mandela makes mistakes, you know, but he was somebody who just could not be bought, and everyone knows that, and everyone felt it about the man. And here's to Scotland's working folk, the day is coming soon. MacLean is an astonishing man who stimulates their imaginations about what is possible from ordinary people. You're talking about a Glasgow primary school teacher. A Glasgow primary school teacher. Where are they? Where are they leading political movements nowadays?
2 days after his burial came the 1923 general election, and with it Britain's first Labour Prime Minister, the illegitimate son of a Lossiemouth maidservant, Ramsay MacDonald. Men like Maxton, Shinwell, and even Gallagher would take their battles to Westminster. Could they, through reform, succeed where revolution had failed?